Hello there, it's Fisher. As promised, I thought I'd give you the start the chapter readings, or rather book excerpt readings that I said I was going to do. Some of them will be occasional full chapters. Others will be, say, 1 or 2 pages. But I thought I'd start with basically the very first chapter. So here we go. Right page first. Sorry. Right. Okay. So, the chapter title is One Known Consequence of Cliffhangers, the always unexpected opening next act. Thick, dense and oppressively acrid smoke, darkness, faint sound of radio chatter mixed in with the slightly more audible moans from the dying. Death hangs in the air like a shroud, covering its newfound territory with a mixed suffocating cloak. From within the smoke, beams of torchlight pierce the veil like needles through skin, as shadowy beings, barely visible, phase in and out of view behind them like ghosts. Their ethereal limbs, movements, seemingly drawing up from the floor beneath them, cascading shadowy tendrils in their wake. Intense heat buffets the air around them, causing even these shadow creatures to shield themselves, lest the heat consume them forever. Behind the thunderous drumbeat of heavy boots on concrete floor, a low and steady rumble periodically shakes those drums to a terrified standstill. Panic, confusion, fear, desperation, pain, suffering. All these are overshadowed here, but not just by death. Something else dwells in this domain, something old, very, very old. Though it hides itself behind its presence, so dark, so heavy, can be unmistakably felt. It knows this all too well. It relishes this fact. It satisfies it. It satiates it. Feeds a hunger that's not been satisfied for eons. As if giving the smoke life, it manipulates it, shapes it, contorts it into grotesque, undulating and unnatural forms. It doesn't hide this fact from onlookers either. It desperately tries to convince their minds that their eyes betray them and force themselves to believe this lie. But this just makes it stronger and bolder. More overtly it shows forth. Within the confines of its newfound choking, hellish dwelling, it begins to lay traps for the unwary and unprepared, drawing would-be rescuers away from the security of their companions with sounds of distant children's laughter and playfully hurried footsteps to a favoured hiding spot. Each good-natured Samaritan then that ventures forth to aid them is quickly and violently devoured, their screams of pain and anguish snuffed out by the roar of newly intensifying flame. Soon its power is such that it is able to venture past this place of concrete and steel to the airy and vast expanse of the world beyond. It's out here, engorged on the newly open well of souls below it, that its truest forms are realised in smoke and flame. To the eagle-eyed and more willing to see, the sickening display as it begins to form itself within the smoke is short-lived. This is only a taste of what it craves, and as the first of the World Trade Towers begins its rapid and terminal descent, it not only seals the fate of thousands of lives, but seals the crack that Hoth's ritual had opened, and once again locks it away. The well of souls may be open, but there were 2 more locks yet to crack. The patch of pavement 20 or so feet from World Trade Center 1 is a slightly portly, middle-aged World Trade Center security guard named Henry Clark. He sat on the ground, legs outstretched and straight, but spread wide. His arms are pressed firmly against the ground, holding him up in a rigid, leant-back position. A look of both abject terror and revulsion covers his sweat-laden and blood-covered face. The look that he has held in that same position with nary a change for a solid 30 minutes. it only being broken by the occasional muttering under his breath of, "My God, why? Why would you?" before it resumes its previous position once more. He's not found the wherewithal, nor the realisation of his surroundings or current situation to comprehend what is happening around him and the real danger he is in. No one could blame him, however, as he has just been witness to an horrendous spectacle, and one so devastating and horrible he would likely be eternally traumatised by the single event alone. Never mind the setting this event is framed with it, or what is about to occur in front of his eyes. See, 30 minutes ago he was directing World Trade Center workers towards assembly points and overly curious members of the public towards the nearest safe observation point. In his eyes, they're going to gawk anyway, so his reasoning is, may as well keep them safe whilst they're doing it, and away from other people who aren't sick fucks like them. All this was going quite smoothly until from nowhere something struck the ground next to him with such force he was knocked 3 feet backwards and down onto the ground. It wasn't until he had sat up and regained and controlled his faculties that once again he lost them when he saw what had put him on the ground. Directly between his feet and stretching out into the road beyond for a good 90 feet were the large, almost circular deposits of blood, flesh and bone, left behind by the near unrecognisable remains of somebody having bounced from impacting the pavement like an almost rubbed comet lying 90 feet away. He too was covered in this person's blood. The smell of iron filling his nostrils, sinew and flesh clung to him, and the tarmac stretching out in front of him. None of it was his. He wasn't injured. Save for the mental damage, his continued and sustained viewing of these remains were destined to forever take his psyche. But just like the old saying goes, he ain't seen nothing yet. It began with a very slow drip of the blood from his nose. At first he didn't notice. Not until he began to feel that drip begin to turn into a torrent from the back of his head, round over his ears, and for a brief few moments blinding him as this blood was violently sucked out from beneath his eyelids by some unseen force. He could have just shaken all that off, as his imagination after a seriously traumatic incident, but what happened next would forever make that lie we all tell ourselves so that we can cope, never able to mask what was unfolding before his eyes. An inch-long river of interlocking tendrils of blood had begun to form and connect each of these pools of remains, and were beginning to try and coalesce themselves into larger and more active pools. These inch-long rivers became 2 inches thick and almost seemed like a weird tentacle creature as they shot out to retrieve other bits of bone and flesh, or join other developing rivers almost 10 feet away. He found himself unavoidably mesmerised by the spectacle, not realising these tendrils that wrapped loosely around his neck. He became extremely aware of them, however, when he instantaneously tightened around his throat and began to drag him by his head, scraping his face against first the pavement and then down over the curb and across the coarse tarmac road. He screamed in both unbridled panic and agonising pain as the speed of his tendrils were dragging his face along and was tearing chunks of his flesh from his face. Then, without warning, he stopped moving. He could hear something that he could only best describe as a bubbling cauldron of boiling hot liquid mixed in with a continuous sucking squelch, underlying the snapping of connecting Lego bricks, all wrapped up in the most terrifying and unnatural noise that seemed to be both agonising pain and sorrow that echoed everywhere and nowhere, almost freezing time as it split the air with its tongue. For a good while he dared not look at what he knew was the noise's source almost directly in front of him. It was so close he could smell the very rich quantity of iron in the large amount of blood he knew was there. But he had to witness whatever may be before him if he was going to escape in any successful way. He slowly raised his head, eyes still shut tight. Desperately he willed for them to open. After what seemed like an age, he opened them as 2 very thin, barely noticeable slits, but this was enough to glimpse the horror he saw. In front of him, writhing in an unnaturally contorted and pulsating ballet, was a reforming and reanimating form of a man, in gloriously disgusting, grotesque detail. skull fragments shepherded globules of brain matter into a single location as he began to seal it within the safety of his newly forming skull. An eyeball, almost in rewind, reverse popped, the fluid, retina and nerve, all meeting at the exact moment before being dragged by the optic nerve back into a now fully intact skull. Flesh, bone, tendons, veins, nerves, all were warping and wrapping themselves together before its lone observer, whose mind was rapidly deteriorating into mush, unable to process the impossible event occurring in front of his eyes. This poor soul's final and single remaining memory etched on his devastated mind. The partially reformed man, skull barely covered in muscle, looked directly at him, with his one and only blue-green coloured eye, and winking at him with his still reforming eyelid, before a column of blood rose up in front of it, and obscuring our security guard's view, before imploding, and both the reforming man and any trace of, well, anything, simply vanished from existence, along with his mental stability. Okay, so that's the opening to Legion Saga sequel. I will pick another bit from what I've done so far in the next couple of days. It won't be as long though this time, this next time, it'll just be an excerpt, because obviously I don't want to give too much away. So it'll be a couple of pages from perhaps later on. I'll just pick them at random. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed that, and it's whet your appetite a bit to not only maybe buy the sequel, but if you haven't bought it yet, buy the first book called Prologue. It's out on any sort of any book selling site that there is. You can buy it from anywhere in any nation.